We are live, Rumble Studio, Rumble, good morning, YouTube. Let me make sure YouTube is working. Be live on YouTube. Let's see. Yes, we are live on YouTube, even though YouTube's not showing me much. We're live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook / Work on Your Game University. We are live. We are live on LinkedIn / Dre All Day, / Dre All Day. We are live on Instagram at Dre Baldwin, live on TikTok at Work on Your Game. As y'all are coming in, shout yourselves out in the comment section. Please tap the screen and like the live. Those of you watching on TikTok. If you're watching on TikTok, tap the screen to like the live. Get the likes going on TikTok. Nobody has liked the live yet. Like when I first started talking, it literally says 0 likes. So like the live on TikTok, get the likes up. I will pull Kevin Samuels if I got to. Those of you don't know what that is, you'll find out if I need to. Just like the live. Like the live, everybody, as y'all are coming in. And let's get our time set. How much time we have here today? As y'all are coming in, shout yourselves out. Tell me your locations, and we will get into the proceedings this morning. Tell me where you are checking in from, and we're going to get started in a moment. The topic here today, we're going to talk about Howard Stern. He used to call himself the king of all media back in the 90s, Howard Stern. We're guessing that he's no longer the king of all media. Just found out that his show is getting canceled. And it's not really about Howard Stern because I'm not a listener to or viewer of Howard Stern's material, but it's representative of a bigger picture of things that are occurring, like we talked about last week with Stephen Colbert. Howard Stern is another victim of the same thing that Colbert has become a victim of. That's what we're going to talk about here today. So Howard Stern, shout yourselves out in the comment section. Tell me your locations. Tell me your locations, where you are checking in from. As you come in, tell me your locations. I'll shout out a couple locations, then we'll get into the proceedings here. Let's see over on TikTok. Please like the live on TikTok. Get the likes up on TikTok. We're not even at 2,000 likes yet. Get the likes up on TikTok. Robbie Lance, good morning to you. Gary Gray, good morning from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Shout out to Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Robbie Lance, Dre All Day. Marky Man from Sacramento, good morning. Carol Ann Collins from Newburgh, New York. Beaufort, Georgia. Jules checking in from Northern California. Aquarian Genius MCO. What is MCO? The only MCO I know is the Orlando Airport. Is that where you're at? Are you at the Orlando Airport or somewhere else? Rub Dak checking in from Augusta, Georgia. Shout out to Augusta, Georgia. Ron checking in from Lima. Shout out to Lima. AG Collectibles said his terms were acceptable. Whose terms? Marquita checking in from New York. Shout out to New York. Happiness Now from ATL. AG Collectibles from Pensacola. Shout out to Roy Jones. Marcus M. from Florida. Lahette, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Shawnee Martin Sutt from Texas. Nikki from Connecticut. Horse from Georgia. Andy Bub from Louisiana. Slit 282 from Horse Branch, Kentucky. Never heard of that place, but okay. Shout out to Horse Branch, Kentucky. Adam said Howard Stern is retiring, I heard. Well, I heard he got canceled. That didn't sound like retiring to me. But Wayne said Ohio. AG Collectibles was saying Howard Stern said he didn't want any MAGA listening to his show. That's not a good idea. We'll talk about that a little bit. Young Stats. This is Trey checking in from Strawberry Mansion, Philly. Shout out to Strawberry Mansion. When I was a senior in high school, we played against Strawberry Mansion at their gym. They beat us my senior year of high school. Shout out to Strawberry Mansion. 5,000 likes. Thank you, everybody. Keep getting the likes up. So here's what we're talking about. Howard Stern and what exactly happened with Howard this week. So after nearly 20 years being on Sirius XM, that's the place where he had moved his show. He was on another platform like back in the 90s when he was probably in his heyday, I would say in the 90s. Going into the early 2000s, it got announced that his show is being canceled. And this is the guy who used to pull. Howard Stern used to get 20 million listeners every single day. Can you imagine that? Back in the day, Howard Stern would do a show. Imagine put on a YouTube video and getting 20 million views every single day when you put a video out. That's what Howard Stern was doing back in the 90s. 20 million listeners a day. Nowadays, he's getting around 125,000 listeners per day, which is still, for most people, that'd be great. But based on his standards and what he got hired based on his standard, he's getting 20 million people a day. The number has gone down. Now, the issue is a few issues here, because it's not as simple as, well, his numbers went down, that's why he got canceled, because media is so split these days. There's so many different ways to put out content. Back in the 90s, if you wanted to put out content, you had a TV show or a radio show, and that was it. If you didn't have a TV or radio show, then nobody could consume you no matter what you had to say. So there were fewer options, so it was easier for everybody to put up numbers. Nowadays, anybody can put out content through social media, TikTok, YouTube, etc. So you're competing against millions of people, literally millions of people who can create content. So his numbers being down, on one hand, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But at the same time, Howard Stern got his deal and negotiates his contracts based on, I'm the guy who can bring in this number of people. He's not bringing in that number of people. This creates an issue. So David Stern was the commissioner of the NBA. Howard Stern, this is the radio guy. He was the original shock jock. I don't know if people even still use that term, shock jock. But Howard Stern invented being a shock jock. He was the first guy to build a reputation for being on the radio, specifically on the radio, and saying things that were somewhat outlandish. And it's not that he was saying things that people that he didn't believe. He was saying things that he actually believed, and he had the balls to actually say it out loud. That's what made Howard Stern back in the days, back in the 90s. And again, I didn't even used to listen to his show, but my dad would listen to his show all the time. My dad he did basically factory work for like 30 years. And when he would be at work, the way his workspace was set up, I remember going to his job a couple times and actually working at his job one summer when I was a teenager. My dad's workspace was like, he had a little, it's kind of like a little office, but it was a factory. So he had his room inside the factory. And in there, he could listen to whatever he wanted. He was probably, I'm guessing, listening to it out loud on the radio or something like that. And, Howard Stern's show used to be like 4 or 5 hours long. So this show was going all morning, and people would drive to work listening to it. Then they would get to work and listen to it all day while they were at work. My dad used to listen to the show like religiously. He was a huge Howard Stern fan. I remember Howard Stern put out a book. My dad went and bought the book. He was a fan of Howard Stern. Howard Stern had a lot of fans, 20 million listeners a day. Back in the day, that's a lot of fans. He was the original shock jock because he would say things that people might have been thinking, but nobody was saying it. He would say it out loud. Nobody else on the radio was saying it out loud. He would talk about stuff. And he built his brand on, again, saying stuff. He fought against the FCC because he would say stuff that the FCC didn't like. That's the Federal Communications Commission. That's an organization that basically says, hey, you can't say that on the airwaves. You can't say this on the airwaves. They would come at you. They would fine you. They would sue you. They would attack you, or they would try to enforce rules upon you if you did something that they didn't like. So do you all remember probably about 20 or so years ago when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson were performing at the Super Bowl? And Justin Timberlake ripped the cover off of Janet Jackson and the breast got exposed. I remember that. What year of the Super Bowl was that? Whatever year that was. Sometime in the 2000s. When that happened, the FCC, they came down hard on whatever network was broadcasting the Super Bowl because that wasn't supposed to happen during the Super Bowl. That, nip slip, whatever they end up calling that, Nipplegate, that happened with Janet Jackson, that was not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to show that over the national broadcast airways of a live broadcast, and a fine had to be paid by whatever network that was because that happened. Was that 2004? Yeah, whatever year that was. So the FCC, that's what they do. They basically are the police of what you put out on broadcast networks. They still have power, but they don't have as much overreach when it comes to, let's say, TikTok or YouTube videos as they do over the radio and TV. And the reality is people are consuming their content through podcasting, TikTok, YouTube videos these days more than radio and TV. So the FCC doesn't have as much reach. They're probably trying to get it, but they don't have it. So Howard Stern got fined millions of dollars for saying things that people didn't like him saying. He would interview celebrities in ways that nobody else could, not because the celebrities weren't open to the interviews, but because Howard Stern was willing to ask questions and make comments that other people who have radio shows just weren't willing to ask, and they weren't willing to say. He would ask them stuff that, again, people wanted to know, or that, well, once he posed the question, people were like, damn, that is an interesting question. And then people would actually answer the question. And people came to the show knowing this is the style of show. Howard Stern's show is not some buttoned up corporate interview where you get all the questions prepared ahead of time. This is more freewheeling. It's more loose. I'm going to ask you stuff that goes off the script. Don't send us the questions ahead of time and tell us what we can and what we can't ask. Howard Stern was not that type of dude. So the closest that we have to that these days of someone who's known, I say the closest, they're not really that close, will be Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is not Howard Stern. Joe Rogan's more calm, rational guy. He's more like open-ended questions, having a conversation type of dude, what Joe Rogan does. What Howard Stern was doing back in the day, those of you who are not old enough to remember Howard Stern when he was Howard Stern from the 90s, there's nobody. No, I can't say there's nobody. There are people out there today, but they're not as big as Howard Stern. They don't have as big of an audience as Howard Stern. So some of you may know of them, and you could name drop in the chat anybody you think who fits the description. There are a few who may come close, but Howard Stern, the way he interviewed people and the fact that everybody knew who he was and everybody was listening to him is what made him what he was. So, for example, during the last presidential campaign, you had Donald Trump on the Joe Rogan show. And there was an interesting interview. It was like 3 hours or whatever it was long. And Trump would go on all these interviews. The thing about Trump doing interviews is that you can ask him anything because he's willing to talk about anything. And he's a conversationalist type of guy. He likes to have conversation. He likes to talk. He likes to talk about himself. Likes to talk about what he's thinking. He likes the attention. He's that type of guy. Now, contrast that to Kamala Harris, who was doing the interviews because she had to, because that's the only way she was going to win. She would not, I've already said this many times, had she gone on the Rogan show, that would not have been good for her campaign. That would have been disastrous for her campaign. I'm bringing that up to say that Donald Trump, had he run for president back when Howard Stern was Howard Stern, that would have been probably the biggest interview of the decade of the 90s. Had Donald Trump, current politician guy, run for president back then and gone on the Howard Stern show, that would have been a crazy interview. And Kamala Harris running for president in 2024, had she gone on the Howard Stern show back when Howard Stern was Howard Stern, that would have destroyed her career, because he would have been no holds barred. No, you can't tell me what questions to ask and what I can't ask. And we're going to have a real conversation here, and is completely, nothing is off the limit. Nothing's off the record. Kamala would not have survived that interview. That's how Howard Stern was. Now, what I remember Howard Stern for is not any specific interview, but those of you who listen probably remember some specific moments. I remember him for having the girls basically taking their clothes off in the studio to show their bodies off to Howard Stern. I don't know how that became a thing or why that became a place that a girl would go to show off her body and basically strip down all her clothes and show off for Howard Stern. But that was a big thing. It was a big thing on the Howard Stern show back then. So he was, again, completely anti-establishment, doing this on the major airwaves. Again, he's not doing this on YouTube or TikTok. He was going against the establishment while in the establishment. And because he had such a big audience, they couldn't stop him. That's who Howard Stern was. And that's why he became a big force. Probably why he got such a great deal with Sirius, whatever his deal was. He's probably getting paid a whole lot of money simply because of the reputation that he brought with him. Let's find out. What was Howard Stern's contract with Sirius XM when he first joined? Then what is his contract now, or what was it up to now? And what network was he on when he was in radio back in the 90s during his heyday? So let's get some details here and find out what Howard Stern's business deal was. So Howard Stern was on radio back in even the 80s. I don't remember him from the 80s, but he was in the radio 80s and the 90s. He was on first Infinity Broadcasting, was later got merged into CBS. So this guy was basically on CBS. He was on New York. He was in New York City, which is was the radio capital of the world, was New York City. Any of you who knows, you know. New York is the place to be if you're on radio. He was on radio from 1986 to 2005. I didn't know he was on that long. Now, during that time, he was the number one morning show in the country. So basically everywhere in the country, everybody was listening to this dude every day. Then he signed a contract with Sirius XM in 2004. So this is after he gets off the radio in New York. He signs with Sirius XM when things are starting to go more like, what do you call that? Digital radio. His show started January of 2006. His deal, listen to Howard Stern's contract when he signed with Sirius XM. $500 million for 5 years. This guy was getting $100 million a year. Now, that's not just going to his pocket. That's for the production. He had to pay his staff, et cetera, et cetera. Howard Stern was taking home a good amount of money. This guy's probably taking home at least half of that every year. He was taking home at least $50 million every year. Now, again, that is, you got to pay everybody. And to cover the entire operations, as I said, he got the $100 million. Again, you use half of that to pay off your staff and run the operations. You got another half to keep. This is a game-changing deal because he bought millions of people to subscribe to Sirius XM radio. That's why they were willing to do the deal, because these people become subscribers. Subscribers are paying listeners. Howard Stern bought that audience, 20 million people listening today. He got them all to subscribe to Sirius XM I think my dad has Sirius XM to this day because he subscribed to Howard Stern. He subscribed to follow Howard Stern, and a whole bunch of people did that. He had full creative control, and Sirius XM was not under FCC regulations, so he could do whatever the hell he wanted and say whatever the hell he wanted. And this is still before social media. Social media didn't become a place people went for content till probably about 10 years later when it hit critical mass. So his most recent contract he signed in 2020, it was another $500 for 5 years. So this dude was still getting his money. $100 million a year for a 5-year deal. And again, he was taking home at least half of that. And this deal is expiring at the end of this year. And SiriusXM is not going to renew his contract because his listenership has dropped. And Sirius is probably shifting priorities. And Howard Stern is also an older guy. He might be looking at retiring as well. So this is what Howard Stern was. For those of you who don't remember the days of radio, when radio was the place you went to listen to stuff, Howard Stern was the guy. So it's a big deal that he's out now. And I think it's not so much about Howard because I didn't listen to his show. It's about a shift of what's happening business-wise, about media, about legacy voices. He is a legacy voice because he was around in the 80s and the 90s. Shifting trust and what happens when people abandon what made them valuable in the first place. That's where we're going to take Howard to task. We're going to hold him accountable for, I don't even like using that term, but we're going to take him to task. Let's use that term for how he changed his approach. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Dre Baldwin. Many know me as Dre all day, former 9-year professional athlete. I'm author of a bunch of books. I own this company called Work on Your Game Incorporated. What we do here is we weaponize and systematize discipline, performance, and accountability for high-performance individuals and high-performance teams. Learn more about that by going to the link that you see in my profile. I am live on 7 different platforms right now. Instagram's over here. TikTok's over here. Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Rumble, and X. I forgot to check if we were live on X. Let me see. Are we active on X? Yes, we are live on X. So good morning to the people over on X. Please keep getting the likes up on TikTok. Just keep liking the live. Y'all doing a great job. Thank you. Let's keep it going. So Howard Stern, as I already said, he revolutionized radio with rawness, honesty, and unapologetic rebellion. That's who he was, again, before it was cool. It's one thing to say that stuff now. Anybody can say that now, and it doesn't really resonate because everybody's saying it. He was doing it when there was something to actually lose and when he had 20 million people listening to him. It's one thing if you got 20,000 or 200 or even 100,000 people listening to you and you're saying something that goes against the grain. Another thing, when you got 20 million people listening to you and you're on broadcast radio. This is not some independent radio. He was on CBS in the middle of New York City when that was the place for media. He was the guy. He was the original anti-establishment voice. He was. And that's why I believe this is a signal of what's coming in the future. So over time, Howard Stern had happened to him what happens to everybody when you're, well, let's not say everybody because most of us don't have this experience, but what happens to people when you're collecting a whole lot of money, you have a lot of people whose careers are connected to you being successful, and you are in that level of success for so long that eventually your message gets sanitized. Your message gets sanitized. What that means is you kind of smooth out your rough edges. So instead of asking that outlandish question that nobody would want to ask and everybody is like surprised that you even asked the question of the guest, now you ask a little bit softer question. Then the questions get a little bit softer and a little bit softer. And before you know it, the very edge that made you the guy in the first place no longer exists because you have kind of whittled yourself down and now you're smooth. And the whole thing that made you somebody in the first place was that you had an edge. Howard Stern lost his edge. And there are several reasons you can lose your edge. One of them is age. As people get older, they tend to become more, well, it can go 2 different directions. Someone like Howard Stern, because of all the money that he was making and all the attention he was drawing, Howard Stern tended to not be as edgy as he got older simply because, first of all, he got a ton of money. You're getting $500 million contracts for 5 years and they just keep renewing those contracts. Well, would you calm down for $100 million a year? I think all of us would. However you are now, would you relax a little bit for $100 million a year? I think a lot of people would, even if you're not trying to. It kind of naturally happens. When you're around that much money, you're around a whole lot of people with a lot of influence who have a lot to say, and they want you to succeed, and you want to keep getting that check. You might just relax a little bit just to keep getting that check. Did that happen to Howard Stern? Yes. Another thing that happens as you just get older, you just kind of relax a little bit. Most of you, if you're over the age of, let's say, 40, you're probably not as hyperactive mentally, verbally, physically as you were when you were 20. Why? Because over time, we tend to calm down. People tend to calm down over the years. Howard Stern is a human. So this is another thing. The issue with all of this is natural progression for everybody. Issue with this for Howard Stern is that the thing that made him the guy was that he was not the normal person, that he had this edge that nobody had seen or heard before, and he started to lose it. His interviews became legendary because, as I already said, he would ask things that nobody else would even ask, and his questions forced celebrities to take off their mask. If you want to be on the Howard Stern show, you damn well knew this is not the normal interview. No, don't have your PR people send us the questions. We're throwing all that out the window, and we're going to have a real conversation. I'm going to force you to take off the mask. I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff that nobody else would ask. And if you don't answer it, then you're like an idiot on the show. So most people, either they would go on the show knowing that it was going to be a freewheeling conversation, or they would avoid going on the show. And this is what I meant when I mentioned Kamala and Donald Trump. Donald Trump would have been happy to go on the Stern show. He probably went on it a bunch of times when he was, just a business guy back in the day. I can pretty much guarantee Donald Trump went on the Howard Stern show. Let's see if we can find out. Back in the 1990s and into the early 2000s, did Donald Trump ever appear on the Howard Stern show? And if so, how many times? And were there any memorable moments that you can recall? I don't even know if this is true or not, but Donald Trump was the guy in New York in business. Howard Stern was the guy in New York in radio. There's no way that these two didn't cross paths many times. So according to my research, quote unquote, Donald Trump was a regular guest on the Howard Stern show in the 90s and the 2000s before politics. He appeared on Stern show 20 plus times in the mid 90s and into the early 2000s. His appearances were spread across terrestrial radio. That's like turning on the actual radio, and then Sirius XM. And Howard Stern once said that Trump was one of the most frequent guests during the era. So Trump will frequently talk candidly. So this is one of the things that people didn't like about Trump. Well, didn't like when he got into politics. Trump would frequently talk very candidly about women he had slept with or women he wanted to sleep with. He would rank women's appearances, including celebrities, basically the same Trump y'all know now. He would make comments on Princess Diana. Donald Trump said, allegedly, he could have nailed her. That's Donald Trump's words. He could have nailed Princess Diana when she was still alive. He speculated on his daughter Ivanka's looks. This is something people still use against Trump to this very day. Donald Trump said, if Ivanka, that's his daughter, he said, if she weren't my daughter, I might be dating her. Some people don't like that he said that, but yeah, he has said that. And these clips resurfaced heavily when he got into politics in 2016. Trump would also boast about money. He would talk about his real estate deals, his private life, and the same stuff he does now. Stern would joke that Trump was one of the greatest guests because he had no filter. So the same guy that we know now at damn near 80 years old, Trump had no filter, and when he was younger, he had even less filter. He floated the idea of running for president back in 1999, never did it, and of course we know what happened. And all of this became these interviews that Trump did back then. A lot of people started pulling this stuff out of the archives to use against him when he started to get involved in politics. And then Howard Stern eventually started to distance himself from Donald Trump. We're going to get into that in a minute. The whole point is Howard Stern forced people to take off the mask, and people who already didn't have a mask were the best guests. So one of the best guests for Howard Stern was somebody like Trump, who this guy had no filter from the beginning. So I want y'all to tell me how you think Kamala Harris would have done on the Howard Stern show back when it was the Howard Stern show. That would not have gone well at all. I don't even need y'all to answer. That wouldn't have gone. She probably wouldn't even shown up. So his recent years, though, Howard Stern, he had the Stephen Colbert virus. He had the Jon Stewart virus. He had and there's many others whose names I'm not thinking of right now, is that these people, and it's not so much about their political leaning, but it is. It's not, but it is. Because what happened when Donald Trump got into politics, and then, of course, when he won twice, and he's had this 10-year run of being probably the most important name in politics in America and in the world for the last 10 years, Donald Trump, that is that a bunch of people started to occupy what we call the moral high ground. And they started with these political tirades, and they started feigning this moral superiority just to make sure that you and them and everybody in the world knew how they felt about Donald Trump. Now, what I'm explaining to you here is not politically leaning. I have no political leaning. I have no political affiliation. I am not associated with any political party. I have no political identity. The issue And the reason why it does matter what side we're talking about is because a lot of people who lean to the political left, when Donald Trump got involved in politics, it's one thing if you disagree with a candidate. You don't like Obama. You don't like George W. Bush. You don't like Biden. You don't like Kamala. You don't like Trump. Whoever. Don't like whoever you don't like. If you want to speak on not liking the person, go ahead and speak on not liking the person. The issue with the people, especially the people in media with megaphones who didn't like Donald Trump, is that they didn't just say, I don't like Trump because I don't like this policy or I don't like this decision or I don't like that thing. Nobody talks about Donald Trump in those terms. You notice when people talk about Trump, doesn't matter if it was back then or is now, when people talk about Trump, nobody mentions, well, I don't like this policy, that policy, or this decision that he made. Nobody says that. What do people talk about when they talk about Trump? They talk about morality and good person, bad person. And the problem with that is that as soon as you start moralizing, number one, you are going to divide your audience. That's the first thing that happens. What made Howard Stern is that everybody liked listening to him because he was a guy who would give it to anybody. He would give it to either side, no matter what side you were on. He didn't really talk about politics, but even if he did, he would give it to anybody. It didn't matter what side you were on. Everybody was fair game. Everybody was fair game to be cool. Everybody was fair game to be attacked. That's what Howard Stern's thing was. That's why he had 20 million listeners. You don't get 20 million listeners by only talking to half the audience. You get 20 million listeners by talking to everybody. And as soon as he started to get righteous about Donald Trump, first of all, you divide your audience. So now the people who liked Trump, they couldn't listen to Howard Stern anymore because he was arguing against Trump on the scale of righteousness, not on the scale of logic. He wasn't saying, I don't like this policy. I don't like this decision. I don't like the fact he's going to do this. Instead, he could do that. Instead, he was making it about, well, Donald Trump's a bad guy. Donald Trump is a bad type of person. Donald Trump is, I don't like anybody who likes Trump. I don't like anybody who supports Trump. I don't like anybody who agrees with any of Trump's policies. And it became this good person, bad person. I'm above you morally simply because I have an opinion that differs from yours. As soon as you do that, now you just cut your audience in half automatically. And on top of that, you're polarizing the audience that you have left, because even the people who could listen to him trash Trump and trash Trump supporters, even them, not all of them are hardcore leftists that absolutely hated Donald Trump. Some of them just wanted to hear Howard Stern do what Howard Stern does, which was not talking about politics. Again, this is the same problem that Jon Stewart has, same problem that Stephen Colbert contracted, same problem Jimmy Kimmel has. A bunch of them have the same problem, is that they're trying so hard, whether they're trying or they believe it. Maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe they really believe what they're saying. I think Jimmy Kimmel really believes the stuff that he says. They are going so hard to make it look like they don't like Trump that they stop doing the very thing that got them fans in the first place. It's the same thing I said about Stephen Colbert. Same thing I'll say about Kimmel. Same thing I'll say about Stewart. Same thing I'll say about Howard Stern. Is that even though I was not a big listener to any of these folks, I have consumed some of all of their material. The reason that you listen to them is not to hear them tell you serious things about serious topics. If I want to hear serious people talk seriously about a serious topic, I turn on the damn news. I don't want to hear these guys who are known as funny guys, comedians, people who take the edge off and give me something that entertains me while maybe still talking about something that's information-based, but is entertainment. When you take the entertainment platform that you built, that made you who you are, and you try to get more serious and you try to start lecturing your audience about how they should feel, or lecturing them about how you feel about a serious topic, and you start doing that every day, well, you just diluted the very thing that made you who you are. All right. I'm not turning on Howard Stern to hear you tell me serious things about politics. Does not mean that you can't have an opinion. All right. Stephen Colbert has an opinion. He's a person with an opinion. Jon Stewart, Jimmy Kimmel, Gayle King, whoever. And Howard Stern. Any of these people. You can have your opinion. All right. You're free to have an opinion. If you want to share it every now and then, share your opinion. But as we say in the productivity world or the effectiveness world or the leadership world, keep the main thing the main thing. What was Howard Stern's main thing? One thing we can all agree is that his main thing was not politics. Please keep liking the live over there on TikTok. His main thing wasn't politics. His main thing was not even serious topics. His main thing is this main thing that all people who have this comedic bend do. I wouldn't even call these guys comedians. Like Stewart, Colbert, Kimmel. Are these people comedians? Not really. Jay Leno. What's the other guy? Conan O'Brien? Conan O'Brien. David Letterman. Howard Stern. They're all in the same lane. They're not technically comedians. What they do is they have a show where they will talk. You know how they would do the monologues, like Leno and Letterman. They would stand up and do the monologue, and then they would sit behind the desk and interview people. They take serious stuff that's happening in the world, and they find a way to make a joke about it. That's the reason people watch the damn show. There's a reason why it's the last thing that people watch before they go to bed, because they don't want to hear all this serious shit before they fall asleep, because it leads to anxiety in the subconscious mind when people are being too serious. People listen to Howard Stern while they were at work, not because they wanted to be informed or educated about what was happening in the everyday news. My dad listened to Howard Stern for, how long was this show? 4 or 5 hours a day? They listen to that stuff 4 or 5 hours a day, not for the educational, informational angle of it, but because they wanted to be entertained while they were doing something mundane like working at their jobs. That's why people listen to Howard Stern. As soon as he started turning and started trying to be too serious and tell you what he thought about a serious topic, again, it's not that he was wrong to have his opinion. What he was wrong about is that he diluted the very essence of what his show was about and why people wanted it. If I want to know something serious and I want to hear serious opinions, I'll turn on CNN or Fox. I turn them off and turn on Howard Stern because I don't want to hear serious opinions anymore. I want to laugh. I want to hear something funny. I want to hear something irreverent. I want to hear somebody taking serious issues and finding a way to laugh about them and make jokes about them. That's why I turn on the show. That's entertainment. And by the way, entertainment outsells education 20 to 1, 100 to 1 in every aspect of life. There's a reason why the Kardashians and these guys I just mentioned, Jay Leno, Letterman, Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Kimmel, there's a reason why they all earn more money than all the teachers in the state of California put together. I mean, if we were to ask all of you, I think all of you would agree that teachers do a more important job than Jay Leno does. Why does Jay Leno make more money than all of them put together? Because entertainment sells better than education. It's just the truth. So why would you, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Jon Stewart, Howard Stern, why would you go from entertainment where all the money is, and this is Howard Stern with $100 million a year contract, why would you go from entertainment, that's the golden goose that's laying the golden eggs, why would you go from doing that to trying to be educational? And when I say educational, it's not like he's teaching you anything, but what I mean by educational is that you're being more serious, talking about more serious topics. Excuse me, and you want your opinion to be taken seriously. Why would you do that? And here's the reason why they did it. We all got to admit it. TDS. That's the reason. Everybody knows what TDS stands for, right? Okay. TDS. That's what happened. So many of these people went so hard at Trump, it was almost as if they couldn't control themselves. I don't think me saying this right here is the first time anyone, let's just say Howard Stern was listening to me right now. I don't think this would be the first time anybody told him that, hey, remember, you're an entertainment. This is an entertainment show, Howard. Remember, it's supposed to be funny, right? You're supposed to be taking serious topics and finding a way to laugh about it. On November 9th, 2016, that was the day it was announced that was the day after the 2016 election when Trump won. And even leading up to that, the whole summer of 2016, those of you remember it, a whole lot of people who used to be funny turned too serious. And there was nowhere that we as citizens could go to find someone making funny, painting a funny picture about what was happening in serious life. Nobody was doing it anymore. From 2016 to now, a whole bunch of people who we used to look to be funny, they all tried to turn serious. And this is a problem because we want the entertainment. People will pay to be entertained. People do not pay as much money to be educated as they will pay to be entertained. Again, I just gave you the example. The Kardashians make more money than all the teachers put together. And he went on these political tirades where he wanted to be taken seriously, this moral superiority. And again, this is not what people tuned into Howard Stern for. Keep the main thing the main thing. You must remember what your golden goose is that lays the golden eggs. Howard Stern forgot what his golden goose was because he was so caught up in telling you what he thought about Trump. So his fall reflects a broader shift that the public does not want this network sponsored rebellion. When you're working for a major network, especially over the last 10 years, you're working for some major network television show like Howard Stern's on Sirius, which became kind of network level with all the money that they were making off him. And you're putting out a message that's talking this moral superiority. They weren't reading the tea leaves. The tea leaves said that the average American citizen, especially after the 2016 election outcome, average American citizen decided that anything that's coming from some big major network and somebody's trying to tell you what's right and what's wrong, we don't believe you anymore. The reason people stopped believing it was because of what happened in the 2016 election. When the 2016 election occurred, there was a lot of people, myself included, who thought there was no way Donald Trump could win the election. It's cool he got the nomination. He made it all the way to election day. There's no way he's going to win. There's no way half the country's going to vote for this guy, because the media that I had been consuming up to this point made it obvious that there was no way he was going to win. When he won, the first thing that it was basically two paths you could take. When Donald Trump won in 2016, if you were thinking the same thing I was thinking, which was there's no way, is either A, you could do the logical, rational thing, which is say, hey, maybe I was consuming the wrong information. I got the wrong ideas. So let me rethink where I'm getting my information from and consider if I was just fooled and told the wrong things by the wrong people, because literally half the country voted for the guy. I didn't think half the country could vote for somebody who was so terrible based on what I was being told. He's such a terrible guy, there's no way half the country could vote for him. Then half the country voted for him. That means, again, either A, you can say, I was lied to, he's not that terrible, because half the country voted for him, or B, you can say, they told me the truth, he is terrible. That must mean everybody who voted for him is also terrible. Many people chose option B. That's how they led to having, that's what leads to TDS. TDS is a result of choosing option B in 2016. I just happen to be a person who chose option A, which is there's no way. Half the country can't be terrible, which means the story of him being terrible was just not a true story. And I was sold a false story. So then I went and looked into, let me hear what he's actually saying. Let me see what he's actually talking about. Let me see what his actual ideas are. Let me find out the details of these things that people are trying to use against him to make him look like a terrible guy. I'm talking about Trump right here. And let me go listen to some of the people who actually support him and they like him and they think he's going to win and they think it's a good idea that he wins over Hillary. Let me go listen to the full context of what they're saying. Let me go listen to some of these podcasts. Let me go watch some of these YouTube videos. Let me go follow some of these people on social media and see what they're talking about. And that was, I guess you can call it the red pill moment in the last 2 months of 2016, when I realized, oh, the people on the other side are sensationalizing the negative, but they're not giving an honest, objective, in context understanding of what's actually happening here. And the problem with this is not anything that I did. I think what I did is the logical, objective, rational thing. But many people don't think like that. Many people are not willing to change their own beliefs or challenge their own ideas about anything. Many people get a set of beliefs and a set of ideas about life at a very early age. We're talking early 20s. And they go through the rest of their lives with those same beliefs and those same ideas. And anything they see, experience, or come across, they find a way to make it fit into those beliefs. So if someone has the belief that Trump is terrible, and then Trump wins the election, which means half the country supported the guy who's terrible, their belief, what they do to make it fit into their beliefs is that means everybody who voted for him must also be terrible. So half the people in the country are terrible. There's no way half the people in the country are terrible. I can see maybe 10%. I can see maybe 5%, maybe even 20% of the country voting for a terrible person. But half the country, impossible. Was told me I've been lied to. That required me to be humble enough to say what I thought was true is not true. Most people don't have that level of humility to just say, I thought something was true, turns out it's not true. Let me re-examine my thoughts. Let me re-examine my beliefs. Maybe I didn't know what I didn't know. Maybe I thought I knew something that wasn't real. How many people do you know who are willing to do that on any subject? Now, what happened with these TDS sufferers, Colbert, Stewart, Kimmel, Stern, and many others, is that all they did was they tripled down on their righteousness. They tripled down on the righteousness. Okay, so let me just go find more material to support what I already believe, to take me further down the hole that I'm already in. And I'm just going to preach to the world about how I am even more right now than I thought I was yesterday. And they just kept doing it. And the problem is the market told them loudly and clearly that they don't want that. The market didn't want that. Not from you. Now, maybe if I'm watching CNN, sure. If I'm watching MSNBC, I'm watching Rachel Maddow or Joy Reid or Don Lemon. Okay, proceed. Do as you do. Because if I turn on that network, that's what I want to hear. I'm expecting it and I'm getting what I expect. If I turn on Howard Stern, I want to laugh. I turn on Jimmy Kimmel, I want to laugh. I want you to take some serious news item that I heard on the 6 o'clock news. I want you to make me laugh about it at 11 o'clock. They decided they wanted to be taken seriously. This is a bad idea. This is a poor strategy by all of these guys. So media companies, because of this, they've had to move away from prioritizing legacy figures who don't drive numbers or cultural heat anymore. And the reason they don't draw cultural heat anymore is because you're saying the same thing that everybody else is saying. This is the problem. The problem these days, folks, is that these guys who I'm mentioning, and there are many others, I'm just using them off the top of my head, they are saying the same thing that people in the streets are saying. You're not saying anything new anymore, Howard Stern. You have become the everyday person. The thing that made you the man was that you were saying stuff that nobody else was saying. Now you're saying the same thing that everybody else says. So why do we need to pay you $100 million to say the same thing that everybody's already thinking? Well, answer is we don't. That's why you're fired. That's why you're canceled. So this is what happened to him. So Sirius didn't want to renew this $100 million contract. Even the bigger stars can get cut if they're no longer producing returns on investment. And while I'm sure companies like Sirius and even people like Howard Stern and his business, his ecosystem, probably want to keep their show so they can keep doing what they're doing. The issue is if you're not producing the ROI that we paid you for, well, you got to go. This happens to everybody. So this shift that Howard Stern suffered from, I guess we'll call this a suffering, from being he used to be the shock jock, then he became this political preacher. Again, the same thing that happened to Stephen Colbert. That's why he's getting canceled. What's the guy's name? Jon Stewart. That's about to happen to him. Jimmy Kimmel's next. All these people are going to be on the chopping block because the thing that made you famous is the fact that you go against the grain. Now you're with the grain. Right now you're just saying the same stuff. And that's it. Game's over when you do that. So his cancellation is a lesson. If you build your brand on being different, you can't all of a sudden become the same. And if you build your brand on being funny, don't decide at one point you want to be taken serious. That's not the way it works. Serious. No pun intended. So this is really a signal of the death of the corporatized rebel. You can't be a corporate rebel anymore. That's no longer a thing. You see, back in the day, you had a lot of rebels because there were only a few channels to put yourself out there. If you wanted to write a book, you had to go through a publishing company. If you wanted to have a TV show, you had to actually get on network broadcast TV. You wanted to put audio out there, you had to sign with a radio company. And everybody else, we had no choice but to listen to the people who had gotten through the gates. Now the gates have calmed down. The gates are down. If you want to put video out, you can get on YouTube for free. You want to live stream and broadcast a message, you can get on any one of these live platforms and go live anytime you feel like it. If you want to put audio out there, you can start a podcast. All these things are free. There are no gatekeepers. There are no barriers to entry. So anybody can, quote unquote, be a rebel these days as opposed to how it was back then. Here's one place you cannot be a rebel. You can't be a rebel while you're working for a corporation. And the reason why you can't be a rebel while you're working for a corporation is because nobody believes you. This is what's been exposed. This is what Trump has represented. Donald Trump didn't do this, but Donald Trump winning in 2016 and continuing to be this galvanizing figure in politics for good or bad over the last 10 years, what it has signaled is that somebody can come in, go against the grain, look at the establishment and say, I am not going to go with what you say, and I'm going to get a bunch of people to agree with me, and I'm going to prove it by actually winning 2 elections, has upended all the traditional establishment ways of thinking that a lot of people have had in America, including in media, such as Howard Stern. Because now people no longer believe traditional media. And again, we have to give Donald Trump credit for this. He came out with the term fake news. He got people to stop believing the New York Times and got people to stop believing CNN and stop believing anything you heard on the news networks or saw in the newspaper, because when he won in 2016, it flipped everything upside down because people said there's no way this terrible guy can win. He may have a small niche audience, but half the country is not a niche audience. Half the voting bloc is not a niche audience. And people like Stern and Kimmel and Colbert and Stewart, we have to give them one piece of grace that we have to offer these guys, is that they do have bosses. So does Howard Stern actually believe the stuff he's been saying over the last 10 years? Maybe not. He does have a boss. He's getting paid $100 million a year. Who's writing that check? Do those people that write the check have a say in getting in Howard Stern's ear and saying, hey, here's where we want you to go with this? Absolutely. To Stephen Colbert, same thing. What was his? $20 million a year, 40, whatever it was, 60 million, whatever it was. Do they have an earpiece in his ear letting him know here's where we want you to go with that? Yes. Jimmy Kimmel? Yes. Jon Stewart? Yes. These people are all being funded by somebody. And if those people say, we're not fans of Trump, if you're going to keep getting this check, you got to not be a fan of Trump. And you got to make sure people know. If your bosses say that and they're paying you $100 million a year, question, what are you going to do? What would you do? Right, how much do you want that $100 million a year? $100 million is a lot of money. So I, on one level, will give some grace to Howard Stern and Jimmy and John and Stephen. I'll give them some grace for that. If you work in network, traditional platforms of media, I give you a little bit of grace for that. The issue is, if you're positioning yourself as going against the grain while at the same time you're getting a corporate check. The problem is the everyday person does not believe you. I don't believe anybody who's getting a corporate check who's telling me that they're going against the grain or they're fighting against the power or they're trashing Trump. Okay, Trump's terrible. Yeah, we know. We heard you. But you're getting a corporate check. So I don't know if you really believe that or not. Tell me how terrible he is when you're independent. Now, if you stick to it then I believe you. And I actually might not believe you then because you might just be saying it for continuity's sake. You already planted your flag there. So what you going to do? Flip the script now? After all this time, it's probably too late. If you've been trashing Trump for since 2016, it's probably too late to change your stripes now and say, oh, well, Trump's actually not that bad of a guy. Now you didn't put yourself in that position. Now you gotta ride with it. You gotta sink with the boat that you rode in on. So this is the problem with the corporatized person who sounds the alarm as if they're going against the grain, because Trump is technically he's the grain because he's the president. So going against him makes it look like you're some type of rebel because he's the president. The problem is nobody believes you anymore. You're saying maybe what will get you accepted by your peer group or continue to get your check from your bosses and the people who are writing the check from you, or just continuing to appease the audience, the only audience that you have left, because you alienated all the people who are either objective, neutral, or positive about Trump. You can't go back to them. So the only audience you got left are the people who want you to trash Trump, and now you got to keep doing it, even if you don't want to do it. So you basically played yourself into a corner. This is the issue with not keeping it real. So remember Dave Chappelle on his show, he had when keeping it real goes wrong. This is when not keeping it real goes wrong. I'm not sure any of these people are real. We'll never really know because they can't tell the truth on camera. And maybe they are telling the truth. The issue is we don't know. That's the problem. And the people I like listening to are people who I believe they are keeping it real regardless of what the topic is. Those are people I like to listen to. People who just keep it objective and real based on how they see it. And let's be clear about something. Being objective and being real does not mean that I or you have to agree with the person. It's, are they being objective and real based on what they see, what they're telling you, and the conclusions they're coming to? Do you believe that they are telling you what they actually believe? See, those are the people that I like to listen to. The two that I listen to the most when it comes to news, either investigative news, when it comes to investigative long-term stuff, where you got to kind of dig deep for a while and get the full story and it takes time, I like Candace Owens on that subject. When it comes to everyday news, I like Megyn Kelly. Another person I like, but I haven't dove enough into it to put them on the same level, is Tucker Carlson. I like Bannon. I like Alex Jones. There are many others, but the ones I listen to most often is Candace. I listen to almost everything she puts out. And Megyn Kelly, I listen to her show every day. Megyn's everyday news. Candace is more deep dive investigative journalism. Now, I'm not saying that you have to like them. What I'm saying is I believe that both of them say things that they actually believe. And it doesn't matter which side they are praising or which side they're critiquing, they keep it real. I believe they're keeping it real. I don't know about Stephen Colbert. I don't know about Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know about Jon Stewart. Actually, I do know about Colbert and Jon Stewart. I already talked about them last week, that they used to be these people who took serious news, made fun of it, made you laugh. Now they're trying to lecture you. Same thing Howard Stern did. Same thing. Nobody believes you when you're taking corporate money these days. You can't say you're keeping it real and get a check from corporate at the same time. You got to pick one. Which one is it? You want to keep it real or you want that check? And Megyn Kelly, independent. Used to be corporate, now independent. Candace Owens, used to be Daily Wire, used to be with PragerU, now independent. Coincidence? I don't think so. I don't think so. As you keep it too real, you're not going to keep getting that check. See, that's the trade-off. This is the part y'all got to get. If you keep it too real, let me explain it this way. If you're keeping it real based on your principles and your objectivity and your reporting and your ability to look into a situation and see it for what it actually is, which is what journalism is. That's what journalism is by definition. If you actually do that, it is inevitable that eventually you're going to say something that goes against the side that, like what you said last week, you're going to say something that they don't like this week. That's naturally going to happen. So let's say that you're a conservative. You're a conservative and you like MAGA, right? You like Trump. And you're telling the truth about what you see and how you see it, and it happens to be favorable on the MAGA Trump side this week. Next week or next month, eventually, inevitably, something's going to be said or done by the MAGA Trump side that you got to report on, to where you're being critical of the MAGA Trump side. And that's naturally going to happen because nobody's perfect. No organization is perfect. No person is perfect. No president is perfect. No movement is perfect. Eventually, you're going to say something that has to criticize the MAGA Trump side. And when that moment comes, are you actually going to do it? Are you willing to say it out loud and say it with your chest the same way you praise them? Are you willing to criticize them with the same energy? Are you willing to do it? Anybody who's willing to do that cannot continue to get a corporate check, because eventually you're going to get fired by your bosses who don't want you to do that. Your bosses want you to stay on one side of the conversation. As soon as you go to the other side, you're fired. And then if you stay on one side, but then being on that one side is not profitable enough, you still get fired. So see, this is where not keeping it real goes wrong. You get what I'm saying? People who kept it real, they all got fired. Candace Owens got fired. Megyn Kelly ended up out of network TV. Why? Because they were keeping it real. They criticized something they weren't supposed to criticize. They wouldn't go with something that they were told they needed to go with. And because they were willing to keep it real, they got fired. The cost of keeping it real is that you're eventually going to have to go independent in today's world. That's the cost of keeping it real. So the question for all of you, any of you who's in media or thinking about getting in media, are you willing to keep it real, or are you willing to front for a check? It's up to you. If you want to sell out for a check, if that's what you want to do, I mean, a check is a check. Howard Stern is making $100 million a year. That's a lot of money. I'm not saying you're going to get $100 million a year, but money is money. Everybody got bills. So do you want to keep it real, or do you want to get paid? Now, is there a way to get paid and keep it real? Yes, but you got to understand how to organize and run a business, which is a whole different skill. And a lot of people don't have it, and a lot of people don't want to get it. And this is why you get a lot of people selling out for a check just so they can stay under the umbrella, so they don't get rained on. So they can stay in that corporate world, keep getting that corporate check. Do they actually believe what they're saying? We will never know. And even then, you still might lose your job, Joy Reid. You still might get fired, Don Lemon, even though you might actually believe what you were saying. See, so this is the problem. And this is the world that we're in, folks. And this is only going to, everything I've just explained to you will only be exacerbated over the next 25 years. This will only be further exacerbated, is that everybody's going to be independent. There's not going to be there'll still be corporate money, but it's going to get smaller and smaller. There'll be fewer people protected by that. And nobody's going to believe anything coming from a corporate sponsored platform. Nobody's going to believe anything. Those of you who have kids who are under the age of 18, 25 years, in 2050, nobody's going to believe anything coming from a corporate sponsored platform. Doesn't matter what they're saying. Nobody's going to believe it, because everybody's going to understand what I just explained to you. That you're getting paid. You got bosses. Your bosses want you to lean one way. And if you lean the other way, they're going to remove that paycheck and remove the floor out from under you. You can't afford to lose that paycheck. So you got to say what they told you to say, even if you don't actually agree with it. But you got to get on there and pretend like you do. Nobody's going to believe anything coming from TV, if we even have TV, 25 years from now. And those of you who will still be alive, you won't believe anything, because you're going to remember this time, how it used to be, right, back in the day. Today's audience appreciates people being consistent, people being clear, and again, people being honest. And these days, human beings have a sixth sense for when somebody's being honest and when somebody's being fake. We can tell we can't always explain when we believe somebody's being fake, but you can tell when somebody's not honest. There's something about them that you're just not feeling. You ever watch Shark Tank, and Barbara Corcoran's on there, and everybody be looking at an entrepreneur, and they'll have made their presentation, and Barbara Corcoran will be like, I don't trust you. There's something about you. And she doesn't, she always does it. I don't trust you. Something about you. Is that sixth sense? And she's the one who says it. It kind of became her shtick on Shark Tank, amongst other things. But I'm not quite sure about this person. All of you have that sixth sense. And when it comes to corporate sponsored people, traditional platform people, all of us are going to have that sixth sense about all of them moving forward. That game is pretty much over. All that being said, folks, let's open the floor up for some discussion. RIP to Howard Stern show. I think he has till the end of the year, so I guess we'll get to see some funny stuff from him, as he knows that he's a lame duck and his deal is pretty much done. But let's get into the comments and questions. If you got a comment or a question, go ahead and post it in the comments now. I'm reading from oldest to newest, so if I don't get to your comment immediately, please don't get mad at me. I'm not ignoring you on purpose. I'm just reading from the oldest comments to the newest comments, and we are going straight over to the folks on TikTok. Y'all doing a great job liking the live. Thank you, everybody. We're at 77,000 likes to get to 100K here today. Sam DeWitt said, I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone who likes their own voice as much as you. Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you, Sam. Andy said, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hello. Abracadabra says, so many people like being interested on Howard Stern's show. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. And you said Joe Rogan is the highest paid and most popular over everyone. Yeah, Joe Rogan's the biggest one right now. At the same time, Joe Rogan ain't Howard Stern. Joe Rogan's approach is not like Howard Stern's approach. Joe Rogan is he's more down the middle, more objective, and he's not sensational. Howard Stern was sensational. So some of you may not remember Howard Stern back in the 90s. Again, I didn't even listen to the show, but I still knew about the stuff he was doing because everybody would talk about it. Howard Stern was sensational, and he was doing something that nobody else was doing. What Joe Rogan's doing is not necessarily something that nobody else is doing. Other people have copied his style, but he's not sensational. So it's a different approach what Joe Rogan does. But I wouldn't compare the two. Only in popularity. But other than that, no comparison. Switch said his show had video footage that would air on VH1. Yeah, so he was making money in a lot of different ways. Who cares much? Yes, exactly. In New York radio, then FM. And New York was the biggest market in the world. Traditional, good morning to you. Traditional said, I can't stand Howard Stern. Well, he's pretty much done now. His last 10 years was Howard Stern past his prime. Those of y'all who didn't listen to Howard Stern between like the 90s into the early 2000s, between like 95 and like 2010, that was prime Howard Stern. If you didn't listen to him then you missed prime Howard Stern. It's like watching Michael Jordan on the Wizards. It's not the same. You had to see him on the Bulls. So if y'all didn't see him between the mid 90s and early 2000 and like early 2000, that 15-year run, that's when he was the guy. Andy said, I want to know what Joe Rogan's deal is with Spotify. I think it was announced. Somebody probably knows what that deal was. No, Sirius was not under FCC. That's the thing, Andy. They were not. I don't know what the deal is now. I don't know the details of it. Thank you, everybody, who's been sharing the live here today. Nancy said, Howard Stern rocked back in the day. Yes, he did. He was great back in the day. Well, Heck said, Howard changed a lot. I think he got a conscience. Maybe. Well, heck, $100 million will give everybody a conscience. If the person who's handing you that check says you need to have a conscience, a lot of people will find a conscience real quick. I played basketball was my sport. Spin, good morning. Rosie May Smile. Thank you for the follow. Christina, thanks for the follow. AJ Ward said, remember Howard Stern and Trump was talking about the teenage pageant? I don't remember it, but I'm pretty sure it happened, AJ Ward. Stern was on the show Trump was on the Stern show like 20 times. So they probably talked about everything. And Donald Trump's the kind of guy you can ask him any question. There's a reason why I said this last week, and some people were feigning incredulity. I said, if I had to pick sitting down and having lunch with either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, which one would you pick? Even if you don't like Trump, you'll probably still pick Trump. He's a more interesting person. And he has no filter, which means you can talk about anything. But Kamala, what you going to talk about? I don't know. I don't even know what I would talk about with Kamala. I don't even know who she is, what she's interested in, what kind of person is she. I don't know. I've heard her talk a lot. I have no idea anything about her personality. I'm not sure she has one. Donald Trump, we know. Mateo, thanks for the follow. Jason Hatcher, thank you for the share. AJ said, that was cool. Good thing Trump didn't say anything weird during that. I guess you're trying to be sarcastic. But, Trump's already won 2 presidencies. What point are you trying to make here? Wifey Tips, thanks for the heart. Ashley said, fact, age 53 and my priorities have changed. Haven't lost the edge, just in a different phase. Yes, that's true. I don't even know how old Howard Stern is. How old is Howard Stern? Howard Stern might be in his 70s. Let's see. Howard Stern is 71 years of age. So he was born in 1954. So in the 90s, when he was in his prime, he was already in his 40s then. He was mid 40s, early 40s in the 90s when he was in his prime. So his prime years, he was from age, let's say about 40 to about just under about 55. Those are Howard Stern's prime years, which makes perfect sense because it has been shown that statistically, men tend to hit their professional stride between the ages of 45 and 55. And that was the exact years Howard Stern was in his prime, about 45 to 55. Heck said we do calm down. That's what makes 19-year-old Marine so dangerous. Okay. Send it said, OMG. Yeah, he was. I listened. Yeah, a lot of people were listening. Apple said, why do you have to always throw Donald Trump's name into everything? That's a straw man. Straw man of the day by Apple user 225599100. They get the straw man of the day award. So the straw man, for those who don't know what it is, the common logical fallacy when someone takes something that you said or did or what they think you believe, they reframe it into something that you didn't say. That's the straw man version of your point. And then they either present it back to you as a sarcastic point, a question, or a comment. So Apple user just did it by reframing this into a question that I always throw Donald Trump's name into everything, quote unquote. Strawman. Miss Carla, thank you for the follow. Good to be Joanne said Trump changes his mind daily on stuff. Well, doesn't everybody change their mind daily on stuff? I mean, if you're learning new things, you should be changing your mind. I think Trump gets a lot of new information every day. So it makes sense that he would change his mind. Gemini said, Trump is a Gemini like me, no filter. We are blunt and honest. People don't like that. Okay, fair enough. I'm a little bit wary of people putting these blankets personality traits on zodiac signs, however. Because I've had people ask me, am I an XYZ because of something that I said, but I'm not even that thing, but I still have the trait. So then what do you do with that? Andy says she wouldn't have made it through and not have cried. Well, crying might actually be a good thing depending on why she's crying. I don't think she would have even taken the interview because knowing his reputation, I don't think Kamala of 2024 would fit what Howard Stern of 1998 was doing. I don't think Kamala's team would have been reckless enough to let her even show up to that studio. So same reason she didn't go on Rogan. And Rogan is a much more, in terms of the kind of questions you could ask, Rogan is much more safe than Howard Stern was. And she didn't even do the Rogan show. And of course, some stories came out. They're claiming that Rogan didn't organize it or schedule it the right way. Rogan would have moved whatever he needed to move to get her on the show if she really wanted to do it. So I don't believe that. Dwayne, good morning to you. Trower said, woke is dead, long live MAGA. Well, it's starting to look like that, but I wouldn't be so sure. Not just yet. Not yet. Yes, this was just no said. If you spam the comments, you get blocked. That's the rules here. Y'all should know better. Don't spam my comments. Irma V, good morning. The man under your bed says, Sirius can't afford Stern's next contract. Howard can start podcasting tomorrow and get 10 million subs. I actually agree with both of those. And the reason why they can't afford his contract is because his show is not producing the numbers to justify the money. That's why they can't afford it. Not because they just don't have money. And could Howard start podcasting tomorrow and get 10 million subs? Yes, he can. The issue is Howard Stern's approach. He's past his prime. He lost his edge. His edge was, again, what I explained. Taking serious topics and making light of them and making it entertaining. Now he's trying to make himself more serious. There's nothing wrong with being a serious person. But if your whole brand is based around making light of serious topics, then you can't undermine that brand at 71 years old and do something different. That was his mistake. The man said, I hate every policy of DJT. All right, that's fine. But notice that nobody really talks about his policies. Nobody talks about his policies. Vicky G said he was called Don the Con before he was president. People in NY knew. Well, people outside of NY knew that people didn't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a guy who some people loved him, some people hated him, but everybody had an opinion. One of the reasons why he has the brand he has to this very day, even as a politician. Andy said, those who judge shouldn't throw stones to glass houses. You kind of fumbled that saying, but I get what you're saying. Dickie Sanchez said he became Hollywood Howie. I never heard that one, but okay. Dick Sanchez said Donald Trump was at his wedding. Makes sense. You know, those people at that level of fame, they just have a whole bunch of famous people at their wedding. Like Jeff Bezos' wedding had a bunch of people there. He probably they're not even his friends. He just had them at his wedding. Or his wife, really. His wife is one probably had the guest list. Irma, thanks for the gift. Millie Grandio Canada, thanks for the follow. Vicky G said, why was it not this divisive when people disliked Obama or Clinton? Because people didn't get morally righteous about Obama or Clinton. People criticize Obama and Clinton often it was based on policy. Often it was based on actions. And often it was based in logic. And yeah, of course, there was probably some emotion involved in it, but it was mostly based in logic. When people criticized Obama or Clinton, it was mostly based in logic. Even W. Bush, because a lot of people didn't like what W. Bush did when it came to the WMDs and 9/11 and that subsequent war that lasted forever. A lot of people criticized Bush about that. But the criticisms of all three of those guys was all based in logic and rationality. You could draw a logical, rational reason why you didn't like them. Obama said this and did this. Clinton did that with the Monica Lewinsky. George W. Bush did this with the WMDs. You had a logical reason to dislike them. When it comes to Trump, most people's reasons for disliking him are not based in logic. they are justified with logic, but their real reason for disliking him are not logical. They're emotional. So that's why it becomes more divisive, because it's easier to trigger people with emotion than it is to trigger people with logic. To trigger people with logic, you gotta get people to actually think. Most people don't think. Swit said Howard Stern trying to have moral high ground is crazy. Well, that's what he's been doing for the last 10 years. Am too much. Thanks for the follow. Vicky said satire has always been based on political slights. Okay. Doc Blaze, thanks for the follow. Angelica said, hey, Dre, we love your lives. Thank you, Angelica. Who's we? You talking about the audience or is it somebody else? Cherie said, Jimmy Kimmel from The Man Show is judging Trump for being a pig, LOL. Did Jimmy Kimmel used to be on The Man Show? I remember that title, The Man Show. I didn't know Jimmy was on it. Corky Haynes said, thank you, very well said. Thank you. Andy said, I still cannot believe what Colbert said in his rant 3 days before he was sacked. What did he say? Lita Caraballo 9295 said, entertainment will always be the ones to take down this government. Entertainment will be the ones. I don't know if they're going to take it down. Asset said, as Johnny Carson said, even if you can, you should not mix politics with entertainment. Well, you can do it if you do it in a funny way. So, I mean, when the Bill Clinton thing was happening with Lewinsky, whoever was on TV then, I know Letterman was out back then, Leno was out back then, they talked about it. They talked about it a lot, but they made fun of it. They joked about it. It was funny. You knew that when the big story happened, that the Lewinsky thing with Bill Clinton, when that became news, I don't remember this exact day, but I guarantee you that night when their shows came on, Leno and Letterman, everybody was tuned into the show because they knew Leno and Letterman were going to make funny jokes about the story. Everybody knew that was going to happen. That's what made them entertaining, that you knew they were going to take a serious subject and they're going to find a way to joke about it. And through all of this stuff, through Clinton, through maybe not 9/11. 9/11 was probably the one day that these guys probably didn't joke. 9/11 was probably the one time they didn't joke. Everything other than that, they were able to make jokes about it until Trump came along. Then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to be serious. But every other thing that occurred, people found a way to laugh at it. Andy said, legacy media is losing so badly. This is true. Asset Farmer said, you're exactly on point. Thank you. Coach Hikes said, it's called staying in your lane. Yes, generally correct. Vicky said, the projection of Trump supporters should be studied. What are you referring to? Vicky said, his company engaged in fraud of charity, so it's an unreal thing that he was elected. No, this is non sequitur. His company engaging in fraud of charities. Well, charities themselves, many of them are frauds in and of themselves. So that point does not follow, number one. Number two, not enough people knew or even cared about that. Number two, Vicky. So number three, you saying that it was unreal that he got elected based on that is severely lacking enough substance to be the final point. You're starting to sound a little TDSy here, Vicky. Now says, similarly, late night, I want entertainment that can criticize both parties for a laugh. Yes, that's their job. And they seem to have forgotten about that. Murphy the Mutt said, I used to listen to Howard and Don Imus. They didn't like each other. Oh, yeah, I forgot about Don Imus. He passed away a few years ago, right? I never listened to Don Imus, but people like him, they were of the same ilk. And it's good that they didn't like each other because they could go at each other through the radio. Courtney, good morning. Mr. Ohio J said, what I remember most about Trump winning was Van Jones crying on TV. I don't remember him crying on TV. I remember him on TV. I don't remember him crying. I remember him saying that night when Trump won, or maybe I saw it the next day, he said, this was a white lash. That's what he said. It was a white lash from America, Trump winning. It was a white lash against Obama. I remember Van Jones saying that, but I don't remember seeing him cry. But I wouldn't doubt you when you said he did. I believe you. Sid says, it says, are you religious? I do not identify with any religion, so I guess that means no. Michelle said, Kimmel needs to go. Oh, and it won't be long. He probably still has a contract. Cinnamon She said, cutting school lunch programs is serious, is beyond a difference in opinion at this point. Not really. First of all, school lunch programs are food given to you by the government. You want your kids eating food that comes from the government? I don't. I don't want my kids eating food that comes from the government, number one. Number two, if I'm the parent of my child, I will provide food for my child. I don't want the school providing food for my kid that's coming from the government. No, thank you. I don't even want the education that's coming from the government. at school. I don't even want the education. I don't want the teachers, and I damn sure don't want the food. So, Cinnamon She, I get the direction of what you're saying here, but I disagree. I don't want the government providing anything to my kids. I want the government staying the hell out of my way. I can teach better. I can feed better than the government can. And public school is government-sponsored school, just in case any of you not catching what I'm saying. Susan said, you're so on point. Thank you. Common sense. Well, thank you, Susan, in Southwest Florida. Shout out to Southwest Florida. Shout out to Naples. Dan, somebody said, funny how it's all happening after U.S. aid collapse. What's that got to do with anything? Ann Grammatico said, you are a great speaker. I like listening to you. Thank you, Ann. Carolyn Rudder said, you're hitting the nail on the head. Thank you. Jeep OIO said, you are very good. Thank you. Traditional says, Stern made so much money. Yeah, Howard Stern is good. No, he's 71. He can live to 100. I think he got enough money in his IRA. I think he'll be all right. Asset Farmer, thanks for the follow. Ben Lee Kata said, doesn't the right do the exact same thing with oligarchs? The exact same thing as what? What are you referring to? And what oligarchs? What oligarchs are you referring to? Shina H, good morning. Leader now says leaders of both parties should listen. Good common sense. Well, listen to what? Listen to who? Ashley said, two awesome ladies and love those guys too. Are you talking about Megan and Candace? Yes, I like both of them. Marcus said, this is why we listen to you. Thank you. Vicky said, the conspiracy theorist, this is wild. Straw man of the day. Vicky, you've been trying. So here, you finally got a straw man of the day award. So Vicky G has been active in the comments here today. Clearly not a supporter of Trump, I guess. And Vicky, you sound like you may be leaning hard to the left, which is fine. Fair enough. It's good to have you here. It balances out what we have in the comments. Vicky said, when I was talking about Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens, she called them conspiracy theorists. So Vicky, I'm not sure your age range, but I'm hoping with you calling these two ladies conspiracy theorists and then using 3 crying, laughing emojis that you're under the age of 25. If you're over the age of 25 and this is what you came up with in response to what I said, I'm disappointed because you can't be over the age of 25 using crying, laughing emojis as a way of ridiculing a point without actually addressing it. What's your disagreement with either of those ladies that I mentioned? Articulate it in a mature way if you are capable. So I'm giving the floor to you to do that. And when I get down to the bottom of the comments, I'll see if you did. But you do get the straw man for calling them conspiracy theorists without actually saying what about them or their work that you disagree with. Butterfly Howard, good morning. Almighty Don, thanks for the share. C. Burrell, 609, thanks for the follow. Ashley Mack said, walked away from a corporate and gave up that check. Values don't align with the pharma cartel anymore. Fair enough. Jeep Ohio, thank you. Vicky said, Megan was fired for blackface comments. What? Are you asking or telling? And even if she was, so what does that have to do with what I said about her? I said that she is good with reporting the news and talking about the news that happened today and being honest about it, whether she is criticizing the left or criticizing the right. That's what I said about Megyn Kelly. I didn't say what she got fired for. I said she is no longer in the legacy media and she couldn't be reporting the way that she reports today, listening to our stuff now. That's what I said. Carvati said that's what Candace and Megan's did, sold out for a check. But neither one of them is getting a check anymore. They're both independent. And also, let's be clear. When I said sold out for a check, it's becoming more and more obvious to anybody who's working in a big network or traditional media did sell out for a check today because it's harder and harder to keep it real. The more Trump goes along, the harder and harder it is to keep it real and keep your job. Now, 5 years ago, it was not as hard. 10 years ago, it was not hard at all. So just because they got a check back in the day does not mean that they sold out back in the day. But if you're getting a check now, you look like a sellout. Doesn't mean you are. It just means you look like one. But we can't say black and white because I got to hear what somebody has to say. Now said, with your awareness, you can do good things for this country. Well, that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm doing this live stream on TikTok. KJ, thanks for the follow. Let's see where we at in the comments. I'm trying to see if we can get through all the comments here today. I'm not sure. Actually, maybe we will. Vicky said, Megan was fired for condoning blackface. That shouldn't be in line with any corporate policy. Okay, well, that justifies her getting fired then, right? All right, well, what's that got to do with what I said today? Man of Steel said, Candace and Megan did the exact opposite of selling out for a check. That's what I believe. Again, they didn't sell it. They didn't sell anything. They both got fired. Gemini said, most people can't discern. They're too caught up in emotions, easily manipulated. Well, that's why people use emotions, because it's easy to move people. Marky Man said, if you can't spot fake people, you're in trouble. Very true. Gibbs said he going to play Trump reruns. Who? Howard Stern? He probably already played him when he started trashing him. Ashley said Howard had that shock value, and did that really just come out of his mouth? Yes, that's what made his show great. Shibs said he was a provocateur. Yes, he was, and good at it. He was very good at it. Richard Dappling said, I was raised Democrat, Democrat, Democrat until I started thinking for myself. Fair enough. Now, a lot of people on the political left will say that you stop thinking for yourself, and that's why you stop being a Democrat. And Shiv said, don't forget Robin. I remember Robin. She was a good sidekick. Joe says she comes from the middle class. Who's she? And who you referring to, and why does that matter? The Truth said, why doesn't Trump release the Epstein file? Or why didn't Biden release it? We already talked about the Epstein file multiple times here. So if you missed that, watch the replay on my YouTube. Rarius Ducker said, why are you supporting a PDF? What are you talking about? This is straw man. I would give you a straw man, but this is not even creative enough to get the straw man award. So I did read your comments. So I'll give you that. But if you keep posting that, you're getting blocked. Nobody said, did you attend Boston U? No. Why, do I look like somebody you know? Pace Sorm said, thanks for the follow. Thank you. Vic Robb said, Trump ain't never honest. Well, they say that about every politician. When Obama was president, people say he was never honest. Yes. So I did mention a couple of you commented about Robin Quivers. I know she was a great sidekick. She was very good. Caitlin Ryan said, love Howard Stern still. Okay, fair enough. Some people still stuck with him after all of that. Vicky G, you're asking a question about MAGA, which is taking us off the subject, so I'm not addressing that question. Rarius said, no, I already addressed that. All right, so Rarius, you got to get by. You're trying to troll, but your trolling attempts are not even good. Your trolling attempts were good. I would actually read your comments, but your comments are not even good, so you got to get by. Ocean Love said, how he became woke and now he is canceled. Rich, white, hypocritical man from the Hamptons. Okay. VR, thanks for the follow. Caitlin said, DJT is trying to silence media. I don't know about that one, Caitlin. Oh, so Caitlin, now it makes sense why you still like him, because he's been going so hard on TDS that I don't know how you can listen to him if you don't also have TDS. I'm not saying you have it, but Caitlin, you're starting to give hints. DJT is trying to silence media. How can he silence media? If Donald Trump was trying to silence media, how do all these people who've been trashing him for 10 years still exist? Jimmy Kimmel, Howard Stern, who's the other ones? Colbert, Jon Stewart, everybody on CNN, everybody on MSNBC, a lot of people on CBS, a bunch of people who write books, everybody on social media. How is he, if he's trying to silence media, he is failing the same way that Bernie Sanders is failing to end oligarchy. So if Donald Trump is trying to silence media, he's failing. He's failing majorly. Because there's a whole bunch of people trashing him who are still in media. And even the people who lose their corporate gigs, they just start a podcast and keep trashing them. So how is he silencing them? Again, if he's trying, he's failing. So, Caitlin, I'm not sure what you're saying here. It sounds good what you're saying, but it doesn't actually pass the logical sense test. John 1 said Howard Stern was canceled. His contract's not being renewed, John 1, is what happened. Jeep said, man, ask how old you are. Yes, I'm 43 years of age, born February 3rd, 1982. Is my math right? Yeah, 43. Vicky said, to be clear, I don't personally like most politicians have citizens. All I've been voting since 1996. Okay. Oh, you have criticized. You have criticized all politicians. I've been voting since 1996. Okay, fair enough. Your comments still sound very TDS-y. So you saying that you criticize all politicians does not exclude you from also still being a victim of TDS. You sound very TDS-y with your comments. Traditional said he cried. Okay, I believe y'all that Van Jones cried. I said I just didn't see him cry. I just remember hearing what he said, but I wasn't watching the whole segment. So I believe y'all that when y'all say Van Jones cried. I'm not challenging that point. John said kids do better in school with food versus religion. Well, that's why you feed your kids before they go to school, John. They don't need to get food. They don't need to get food in school. And if my kids are going to a public school, I will give them food to take with them, and you eat that. You're not eating the food that's supplied to you by the government. That's not happening. That's my job as a parent. Vicky said Obama fumbled with Flint and Mudami, amongst other things. Biden should have stepped down. Vicky, I get what you're doing. You're hedging your bet here. But what I said still stands. IT Burnout said, I listen to you every morning, work permitting. Well, thank you. John said, those two are conspiracy theorists. Who are you talking about? John said children's grades are better with free lunches than with religion statistics prove. What statistics, John? You ain't listen to those statistics. Stop that nonsense. Nice try. Adeline said Candace has gone too far with her words. She needs to show respect and restraint. Respect and restraint. Restraint on what subject and respect to who or what? Be more clear. Native Babe said Howard Stern is trash. Okay, you're entitled to that opinion. Pinky, thanks for the follow. Adeline said, what happened to Obama's chef? I don't know. It's not the topic. Well, he died, didn't he? I don't know. Bun said, Pivot 101. Well, why didn't Biden? Who cares? Trump has them now himself. Yeah, somebody tried that, and I pointed it out. Dana Marie, good morning from southwestern Michigan. Is that Michigan or Missouri or Mississippi? I'm assuming Michigan. Bob Scott, thanks for the follow. John Paul, The View. Yeah, The View is another one. So if Donald Trump is trying to silence his critics, he is failing big time because he got a ton of critics and they talk every day. Michelle, good morning. Duke's mom says Stern was an everyday guy who morphed into a rich elitist. Well, that happens when you get $100 million a year. I understand. I give a little bit of grace to Howard Stern. If you pay me $100 million a year, that might have some effect on the quality of my message over time. I might change my tone a little bit for $100 million a year. Guido said, my sister was born February 3rd also. All right, shout out to your sister. Bun said, why does Trump, no matter what interview, mention Obama, Biden, Hillary? Because they all do that. Bun, they all do it. Every politician does that. When Joe Biden was president, who did he mention every time he got interviewed? He would mention Trump. He would mention how what he was doing was in contrast to his opponent because they all knew that Trump was going to try to run again in 2024 and Biden was only one term. He knew he was going to run again in 2024. So he kept the pressure on. I want to make sure all of you know I'm here and Trump is over here. He did that every single time he talked. Kamala Harris did it during the 2024 campaign. Hillary did it in 2016. That's what you do. You always got to draw a line between yourself and your opponent so that you keep the audience knowing I'm over here and they're over there. So when it's time for you to make a decision, you know that I'm the better choice. So the same thing you said Trump always does. All the rest of them do the same thing. And this is another thing with Trump. People point out something that Trump does as if the people on the other side of the aisle don't do the exact same thing. They all do it. Only difference with Trump is that he has many more enemies who really, really, really don't like him. And they try to make light and make a news story about every time he does the same thing that all the other politicians do too. It's just when the other politicians did it, nobody talked about it. When Trump does it, it's on the 6 o'clock news or your favorite podcast. Sharky said, I'm surprised Howard Stern lasted this long. I listened until 2013 when I got a new vehicle. Yeah, it is. I don't even know what he's been talking about for the last 5 years, but he's kept getting these $100 million contracts. So I think Howard Stern was doing a good job of driving subscriptions to SiriusXM. I mean, SiriusXM is a paid platform, and he was driving subscribers. So if you can keep the money coming in, I can see why they keep the checks coming. And also, he's 71 years old. So Howard Stern can retire. He can live to 100. I think he'll have enough money in his piggy bank. He's good. So nobody needs to feel bad for Howard Stern. Dana said that's Michigan. That's what I thought. Shout out to Michigan. Bob Scott, congrats on #1 gifter badge. Thank you for the sunglasses gift. Coach Hike said, why do parents have to buy supplies for publicly funded schools? Because they're not funded enough. That's why. They ain't got enough funds. My mom has worked in the public school system, and before the school year, every year, she would go to some educational store, and she would spend hundreds of dollars on stuff for her classroom. That's a common thing for teachers. Every teacher does that. They spend a whole bunch of their own money getting their classroom ready because, listen, being a teacher is I think it's a, what's the word that they use? Not passion project, but it's something you do out of the love. You do it out of love. You don't do it for the money. If it was for the money, most teachers would not be teachers. They'd be doing something else. Again, Kim Kardashian makes more money than all the teachers. And what service is she providing to the public? Vicky said, I'm not trying to hedge my bet. I'm here listening and for discourse. Well, Vicky, you did hedge your bet. I told you hedged your bet because I pointed out that you sounded kind of TDS-y because you were pointing out things that didn't really make any sense, all as criticisms of the right. And after I pointed that out, and I asked you to specifically tell me, why are you calling Megyn Kelly and Candace Owens conspiracy theorists? You conveniently ignored that question. You're still commenting, but you didn't answer that question. I'm still waiting on your answer. Then you changed the subject talking about how you also criticize people on the left. That's like a white person saying something racist and then saying, well, I got black friends. Listen, I know this game. Now, I've been around the block several times, Vicky. I've been around more blocks than you have. All right, I caught you in your nonsense. Now, I'll ask you that same question again. Why did you call Megyn and Candace conspiracy theorists? What conspiracy theory did they put out there? Jason said he does it a lot more. He does it to deflect. Every politician deflects with lies. Every politician does that. Every politician deflects by bringing up their opponent, not answering the question they were asked, and changing the subject. They all do it. They are literally trained to do it. Every politician is trained. When you get asked a tough question that you don't want to answer, the go-to tactic is to answer a different question or change the subject to saying, instead of asking me that, what you should be asking is why my political opponent is doing this and why they're raising taxes and why no one's asking my opponent about this, this, and this. There's no politician in the world who does not do that. They all do it. Donald Trump didn't invent it. Donald Trump has not done it more than anybody else. They all do it the same amount all the time. Doc said Trump equals ratings, ratings, ratings. Yes, he does. Vicky said I did comment that. I didn't see it. What's the comment? Post it again. Tell me what made them conspiracy theorists. Chelsea said Candace is getting sued for saying the French president's wife is trans. Yeah, I know. And did you listen to Chelsea? Let me ask you a question. Did you listen to Candace's series, which was like 8 parts long, maybe longer, on why she believes that? Did you listen to it? And if so, if you listened to it, then what did she get wrong? And if you didn't listen to it, then you shouldn't bring up the fact that she's getting sued as some form of supporting evidence. Third thing, Chelsea, is that just because somebody gets sued does not make them a conspiracy theorist, number one. Doesn't mean that they're wrong, number two. So why are you even bringing that up? I could sue you right now for, I don't like the comment you left on my TikTok live. I could sue you for that. Does that mean you're a bad person? No. Anybody can sue anybody in America. You still have to win the lawsuit. So suing somebody or getting sued does not prove anything. It's what happens after you get sued that matters. Shay Costello said music performances on Stern, top tier, superb audio setup. I didn't know about that, Shay. I didn't know that was a thing. TikTok ref said, think Democrats will ever realize that Trump bad did not work? Well, they should. If they were going to realize it, TikTok ref, they would have realized it on November 6, 2024. Here we are, August 6th of 2025, and they're still using it. So obviously the answer is no. They will never, ever realize it. Actually, I think they already realized it, but to realize it would mean, just think about that, to realize, quote unquote, that using Trump bad as a strategy is a bad idea and it wasn't working. On November 6, 2024, they all should have said, damn, okay, we tried this for 8 years. It didn't work. Let's try a different strategy. I talked about this a few weeks ago. I thought that after Trump won in November, this time around, I said, okay, maybe the people on the left who are anti-Trump, never MAGA, etc., maybe they'll calm down and just be more relaxed and we can have some objective, logical discussion about politics over the next 4 years. I was 100% wrong because here we are 10 months later and it's the same stuff. I mean, what point are people trying to prove now? It's not like he can run for president again. What are people trying to prove? This is proof of TDS, and it's proof that people are much more emotionally controlled when it comes to Trump than they are logically controlled. Because if you're being logical, again, there's no reason to keep bashing him and saying bad stuff about him. What are you proving? He can't run for president again. So who are you trying to convince? There's no one to convince on the subject except yourself. Chelsea said, I like Candace. I'm just throwing this in for conversation. LOL. I get it, Chelsea. I don't think the Macrons, that's the French president, I don't think they're going to win this lawsuit. I just listened to Candace on, she was on Tucker Carlson's show where he was interviewing her. And she was talking more about it. But I've listened to everything about that whole thing. I listened to the whole series when she broke down why she thinks Brigitte is a man. And I listened to when she talked about after she got sued. And I haven't read all the case files of the lawsuit, but Candace has talked about it a lot. The problem is, just so all of you understand, she's being sued for defamation. Defamation is not Brigitte coming out and proving that she's a woman. If Brigitte comes out and proves that she's a woman, that does not win the lawsuit. A defamation lawsuit is not proving that somebody is wrong. That's not what defamation is. And a lot of people don't understand the law. Defamation is you must prove that someone knew the truth and they still told the lie. In other words, the Macrons must prove that Candace knew that Brigitte was a woman, yet she kept saying that she wasn't a woman. That's what they have to prove. And there is no way they can prove that. They can't prove it because Candace detailed how when she got contacted by the Macrons, she sent them a letter. They sent her a letter. She sent them a letter back and said, all I need you to do is answer a couple of these questions. And if you can answer these questions, I won't even run the series that I'm about to put out. I won't even put the videos out. they wouldn't answer the questions. So Candace said, okay, I'm going to move forward with this because this is what I believe. This is a key thing. She put this series out under her belief that this is true. The only way Macrons can win the lawsuit is they have to prove that she didn't believe that that was true, that she knew she was lying the whole time. Now, if you think she was wrong, fine. But proving her wrong does not win you a defamation lawsuit. You cannot win a defamation lawsuit by proving somebody was wrong. You win a defamation lawsuit by proving that somebody was lying. That's a whole different thing. And that she knew she was lying. Not that she was wrong. Wrong is you didn't know and you just put out the wrong information. That doesn't win you defamation. Winning defamation is you know the truth and you tell a lie anyway. How the hell are they going to prove that? This is a bad mistake by the Macrons. I did a whole live on this last week, by the way. Y'all should watch the replays on YouTube. It's a bad mistake by the Macrons. Number one, they're not going to win this lawsuit if it's done fairly. And Candace said they filed it in Delaware. They're trying to get it moved to Tennessee. Candace is trying to get it moved to Tennessee. So we'll see on that front. And number two, they got a whole bunch of people talking about a story that most people weren't paying attention to. That was the mistake. Most people didn't care about that. Candace put that whole series out talking about Brigitte, and her fans listened to it and watched it. But the majority of people didn't care. Majority of people did not care anything about whether that woman is a man or a woman. I think that's crazy, but most people didn't care. As soon as they filed that lawsuit, now you got like 10 times more people caring about the story than cared about it before. By suing her, now you got everybody paying attention. So this is a bad idea by I think they call that the Streisand effect. Am I using that right? Is that what is the Streisand effect and what does it mean? Well, I'm looking for the term for when someone takes a story that most people are not paying attention to, and by giving it attention, you get everybody looking at it. What is that called? I think it's a Streisand effect, if I have it right. Maybe I'm wrong. Streisand effect is when you're trying to hide, censor, or suppress information that actually draws more attention to it and ends up backfiring. Yeah, that's what it is. The Streisand effect. So it's named after this woman named Barbara Streisand. I remember her. In 2003, she tried to sue a photographer for taking photos of her house. And before the lawsuit, nobody had seen the photo. But after the lawsuit, everybody saw the pictures. So in other words, she just drew more attention to something by trying to shut it up when she should have just been quiet. So when you try too hard to shut something down, people get curious. So what the Macrons did is make everybody curious about whether Miss Macron is a man or a woman, when most people didn't care. TikTok ref said, you're right. I do remember talking about that. Vicky G, you got quiet. What happened? I asked you to tell me how Candace and Megyn Kelly are conspiracy theorists. Y'all remember me asking Vicky G this question? She got quiet. What happened, Vicky? Your keyboard doesn't work anymore? You got some crumbs stuck in your keyboard? What happened? Sharky's in said, and don't they have to prove malice because they are public figures? Yeah, there's several things you got to prove to win a defamation case. There are 5 pieces. And I went over this last week when I did the live. But there are 2 specific pieces that they're in trouble with. Let me point it out again since y'all are asking. Tell me the 5 things that must be proven to win a defamation lawsuit in the United States. And by the way, I did this all in detail last week. So if y'all want to hear me go over it in detail, go watch that replay. It's on my YouTube channel. The link to my YouTube channel is in my TikTok profile. So the 5 things is you got to make a false statement of fact, and you got to know that it was false. Number 1, not your opinion, but a false statement of fact. Publicizing it to a third party. That one's done. They did that. Candace did that. Harm to reputation. That's the defamatory meaning. So Brigitte said this is harming my reputation. That one's good. They got to prove fault. If you're a public figure, the legal standard is very high. You got to prove that the statement was made with actual malice, that you are trying to make her look bad. So they got to prove that. That's number 4. And then number 5 is there got to be some damages, meaning I suffered in some way because of the things that you said. So number 2 and number 4 are the challenges that the Macrons have. They got to prove as public figures that Candace is trying to basically tear them down or pull them down, which is very hard to do when you're the president of France and the wife of the president of France, and she's a damn podcaster, a YouTuber in America. That's very hard to prove fault, that she's acting with malice. What can Candace Owens do to pull down the president of France? There's a ridiculous thing for them to sue for. And they also got to prove that Candace knew that she was lying and told the lie anyway. And the truth is an absolute defense in a defamation case. That's why they don't want this to go to trial. This is the Macrons. This is a terrible, terrible PR mistake on every level, because truth is an absolute defense in a defamation case, which means if this actually goes to trial, Candace Owens' lawyers can say the one way we can defend ourselves and throw this and get this entire case ruled in our favor. And Candace said this on Tucker Carlson. She does not want the case dismissed. She wants it to go to trial because then they got to go through discovery, and the Macrons got to provide a bunch of information that Candace's lawyers are going to ask for, and actually they're going to have to prove that she's a woman. They're going to have to prove it. And if she's not a woman, what the hell are they going to do? And if she was a woman, they could have just addressed that a long time ago, and Candace never would have came out with all this stuff. So they have basically put themselves in a catch-22 where they lose no matter what they do. So truth is an absolute defense in a defamation case, which means what? Candace's lawyers can say, Your Honor, all we want to do is prove that she's a man, not a woman. And they're going to go through the process. They're going to try to get the judge to say, okay, Brigitte, you got to prove that you're a woman. And if you can't prove it, then you cannot prove that she was lying, because somehow she got to prove that she's a woman. And what they're going to do is try to produce like documents and doctors, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be tricky if this goes to trial. It's going to be very tricky. It's going to be very interesting, but also very tricky. And if that happens, if it goes to trial, which I think it will, unless the Macrons pull back their lawsuit, that's the only thing that can happen. Candace says she's not trying to get it dismissed. She wants it to happen. So the Macrons will have to remove their lawsuit. That's the only way it won't go to trial. And if it does go to trial, I promise you, I'll be talking about it. So y'all want to hear me talk about, you want to know what I'm going to be talking about in the future? If that goes to trial, I will guarantee be talking about that. Vicky G said you had me cracking up this morning. What happened, Vicky? You didn't answer the question. All right, you still here? What happened? I thought your keyboard stopped working. You haven't answered the question. You said Megan and Candace were conspiracy theorists, and you used the crying face emoji, and now you ain't answering the question. Vicky G, thanks for the gift, the perfume gift. Doc said current media are all conspiracy theorists. Well, I mean, they call everybody conspiracy theorists when they get disagreed with. Everybody calls people a conspiracy theorist when they hear something that they don't like. That's the problem with that term. So all of you, I suggest everybody, Vicky G, you too, stop calling people conspiracy theorists. All it proves to me when somebody uses the term conspiracy theorist is that you're trying to discredit a person who you don't like, or that you don't like what they said, but you're not actually saying what they got wrong. And when you do that, the first thing I'm going to say is what they got wrong. They're conspiracy theorists. Why? And I'm going to actually hold your feet to the fire and get you to tell me why they're conspiracy theorists. Most of the time, people can't answer the second question. They answer the first question. Oh, that person's a conspiracy theorist. Okay, what's the conspiracy? What they got wrong? And usually the person can't answer that question. As you all can see. Stacey D, thanks for the follow. John said, Candace will do anything to keep her name in the papers. I don't know about that. Candace has her own platform. What papers? She got her own podcast. And the last that I checked, I'm gonna look up Candace Owens on YouTube. Last time that I checked, John 1, Candace has 4.5 million subscribers on YouTube on 1.4 thousand videos. And every video that she puts out, she's getting 500,000 views at least within the first, not even 24 hours. So she did an episode with Milo Yiannopoulos. Y'all know this guy? I've heard of him, but I don't know a lot of his work. I'm going to listen to this. And the question is, what does Israel have on Donald Trump? She's talking to Milo. This got 600,000 views, came out less than a day ago. Tucker Carlson and I discussed Brigitte. I guess she took that interview and put it on her channel. That has 1 million views in a day. She's talking about Epstein, Diddy. What is Donald Trump thinking? It's called Israel's One Hell of a D-Rug. That episode came out 5 days ago. It has 1.2 million views. She talked to Harvey Weinstein. It got 500,000 views. Another one about Brigitte, 1.7 million views. Another one about Brigitte, 1.8 million views. Another one about Trump and Epstein, allegedly in the files, 1.7 million views. Another one about Brigitte suing her, 2.3 million views. Another one about Epstein, 800,000 views. So shall I go on, John 1? I'm not sure about her trying to keep her name in the paper. She got her own paper in more ways than one. So Phoenix, the guy that said the Macrons really played this wrong. They brought more attention by suing. Yes, and I think they're going to lose. Not only did they draw more attention to the story, I think they're going to lose this lawsuit. John 1 said, Candace is born a man. That's pretty funny. Coach Boring, thanks for the follow. Jose says, Howard off air. No, he still has a contract. They're just not renewing it. So he probably has the rest of the year. Maddie said, I could listen to you reading Vicky's comments all day. Yeah, Vicky got kind of quiet. Vicky got quiet after I asked her for the third time to supply this material. Bob Scott said, I think Candace is a little upset because you didn't get VP picked when Donald nodded to her about it. I don't know about that, Bob. Maybe if she was upset, she might have been upset when it actually happened. How long ago was that? But that was a long time ago. I don't think Candace was ever seriously going to be the VP. I think Candace they were thinking about her maybe for the cabinet. And I think that was in the first, was it the first time around? Maybe the first or second time around, but that was a while ago now. And Candace got her own platform. And listen, talking about Trump gets her more attention than even being in the administration. I think she's doing better with what she has. So I would not go with that one. Vicky says, I'm not supposed to find it funny. All I do is laugh. That's why I had the crying emoji. So, Vicky, you keep commenting, yet you're not answering the actual question that I'm asking you. So, Vicky, for the fifth time, and you're not answering it. You call them conspiracy theorists. I'm still waiting for you to tell me what the conspiracy is and what made them wrong. John Warren said, people watch Fox News all day. That means nothing. I don't know about that one, John Warren. You're trying, but you're failing. Trizzy said, what's the difference between calling people conspiracy theorists and screaming fake news? Both. They're the same thing. So I wouldn't call anything fake news. I wouldn't call someone a conspiracy theorist. What I would do, if I think somebody's wrong and they make a point, I'm going to tell you what they got wrong. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to call them a name. I'm not going to throw a pejorative on what they said. I'm going to challenge what they said directly and say, I'm not sure about that, or you're wrong, or you're lying, or that's inaccurate. That's what I'm going to do. That's my style. I don't like throwing pejoratives on people as a way of trying to discredit them, but a lot of people fall for that very easily on both sides. So Trump used fake news to discredit the mainstream media. Now, at the same time, the mainstream media helped him out because they were printing a lot of stuff, things that they were trying to over sensationalize the negative side of Trump, and it backlashed against them. And we know it backlashed because he's won 2 elections. And they were the ones giving out most of the information. That's proof. Shari said her series on Kamala's family tree was good. But that's the same thing she did with Brigitte. Same thing she didn't really do it with Epstein. She's doing it with Harvey Weinstein right now, which is interesting. And John said that proves that what she wants is she's just clickbait. No, it doesn't. That would mean that what I'm doing right now is clickbait because I got people who clicked on this and watch this. This is a logical fallacy, is a non sequitur. It does not follow. What you're purporting here is that anybody who gets views or clicks on their content is just clickbaiting. That means everybody who gets viewed is clickbaiting because everybody gets views. If you get 100 views, that's clickbait. You get 1 million views, is clickbait. So anybody who gets looked at is clickbait. That would mean your comments are clickbait because you're just commenting to get attention. So what does that mean you're doing? Does that make you a troll? So your logic is off here, John. I mean, you're trying, but your logic is completely off. I need you to bring some substance if you want more engagement. So Bob Scott said, don't get me wrong. I love Candace all the same. Fair enough. Vicky said, I wasn't speaking on Megan specifically. I do remember her with the birther conspiracy. All right, Vicky, you're fumbling here. Simply Farm said, did you ever figure out your bug repellent issue? Yes, I did. I got some. I remember that from a couple weeks ago. So I got some off spray and I got some, I'm looking at it right now. It's called Picaridin by Sawyer. That one is lotion and those work great. So ever since I've been using those, I've been fine. So yes, I did get that solved. Thanks for asking. American Ecocide said, almost like our ruling class lies a lot. Okay. Whoever you consider ruling class, I would agree. Whoever it is. Narissa Lynn, I don't know who that is you're asking about. Vicky said, I bought you cologne and everything. You're skipping my comment. I didn't skip your comment. I read it. I'm reading the comments in the order that they come, so I'm not reading them immediately. And I saw the gift. Thank you for the gift. Right now, you got the number 3 gifter badge, Vicky. I'm not going to ask you again about that conspiracy theory thing because I know you don't have an answer. So I'm not going to bring it up anymore. John said, if you say outrageous things, a lot of people are going to listen. People can't think for themselves. Yeah, everybody says that other people can't think for themselves. You notice nobody ever admits to not being able to think for themselves, but everybody says that no one else can. Here's the thing, though, John. What I say is that saying outrageous things may draw attention. I will give you that little bit of substance there in that comment, but the rest of this is wrong. And the reason why it's wrong is because if you keep saying outrageous things just to get attention, eventually people are going to catch on to what you're doing. They're going to stop listening. You can't just rage bait people forever without offering some form of substance. Because if I click on your video because you allegedly are saying something outrageous, I'll listen to it. But if you don't fulfill your promise, then I'm not going to listen to the next one. And the next one, and the next one. Candace getting 500,000 to over 1 million views on every video she puts out. So if she was putting out nonsense, eventually people will catch on to the nonsense and stop listening. Isn't that true, John? So since they're still listening, that means she must be offering some substance. So it sounds like you got, I think we got to call this CDS. So you got Trump derangement syndrome. What's that? You got Candace derangement syndrome. I think that's a new one. You got Candace derangement syndrome here, John. What's your issue with Candace Owens? And you said people are going to listen. It depends on what you say. Now, people only listen to you for a certain amount of time if you're saying a whole bunch of nonsense that makes no sense. If what you're saying actually makes sense, people will keep listening. So if Candace got something wrong, tell us what she got wrong. Again, it's the same question I asked earlier to somebody else whose name I'm not going to say. All right. If she got something wrong, what did she get wrong? Point it out and be specific without the pejoratives. Tell me if you can do that without the pejoratives. And this is one thing you notice in the comments here. When I bring up a name of somebody that people don't like, they immediately start with the pejoratives. Oh, this person's a liar. Oh, this person is fake news. Oh, this person is always changing the subject. Oh, this person's a conspiracy theory. Those are all pejoratives. Pejorative is just a term that you use to try to make somebody look bad without actually saying what they got wrong or what is bad about them being specific. If you tell me that somebody's bad, you got to tell me why. My first question is going to be why. What about them? And if what you say is some bullshit, then I'm going to call you out. So, John, what exactly did Candace do that was wrong? That's what I want to hear you say. Without the sarcasm, without the pejoratives, if you're capable. Now, Vicky said, this is better than public school education. You're right. I am better than public school education. I agree with you. If public school could pay more, I would be a school teacher. Coconut Telegraph, thanks for the gifts. John said, Trump is a perfect example of that. Of what? Narissa said, I apologize. Doesn't say who you are. You're a politician. Hell no, I'm not a politician. You think I could be on here talking like this as a politician, Narissa? I am not a politician. I'm also not a lawyer. I just play both of them on TikTok. Deggy said, does Stern get canceled? Well, his show is effectively canceled because his contract's not getting renewed. So that's why we're using the word canceled. John said, because all I ever hear about Candace Owens are outrageous comments. Well, John, you're exposing yourself here. You're exposing yourself, John. You said all you hear about her. Why you have to hear about her? She has a YouTube channel. Why don't you go listen to her? You don't have to hear about somebody when you can listen to them directly. So, John, you're exposing yourself. You're criticizing Candace. You left like 6 comments criticizing her, but you just admitted you don't even listen to what she has to say. So you're going off what you heard about her, and now you're saying negative things about her based on secondhand information. Johnny, you're exposing yourself. The more you talk, the more you're exposing yourself. John said, calling the president of France the first lady a man is outrageous and wrong. Well, is it true? John, first thing you have to ask yourself, when someone says something that seems sensational to you, the first thing you got to ask yourself, is it true? And then you got to find out if it's true or not. Now, do you know for a fact whether the president's wife is a man or a woman? Do you know? You don't know. So if someone does an entire deep dive investigative journalism series on what they think and why they think it, wouldn't it make sense to listen to what they have to say and then draw a conclusion? Or then maybe just have more information? Then you can read the book of the person who wrote about it. And a lot of people don't know this. A guy in France did an entire deep dive on this subject years ago, before Candace Owens. Candace Owens did not start this conversation. She followed up on what that guy in France did. He wrote the book. She deep dived on it after that. And that's how we got to where we are here today. So, John, if you have not done any of that, why are you drawing a conclusion that she's wrong when you don't even have the information? Again, I'm not even saying you have to agree with me. I think Candace is probably right. But I don't know for 100% sure. They filed this lawsuit. Now we might find out. And to say that she's absolutely wrong with none of the information doesn't make any sense, John. That's immature on your part. Again, you can listen to the whole series and come to a different theory than what I came to, but you have to listen to the information first. How are you drawing a conclusion based on what you heard instead of just going and listening to what she said? Not what somebody said about her, what she said herself out of her own mouth. John said, what's the difference if the president of France's wife is a man or not? Irrelevant. This is what we call the relative privation. Relative privation is another common logical fallacy. Relative privation, many of you probably never heard of it, but here's what it is when somebody brings up a point and you don't want that point to be talked about. So what you do is you change the subject to something else. This is what politicians do all the time. So, John, you just accused Donald Trump of doing this. Maybe it was you. Maybe it's somebody else. They said every time Donald Trump is asked a question, he brings up Biden and Hillary and Obama. That's the relative privation. Every politician does this. So you ask Ron DeSantis a question. He says, instead of asking me that, what you should be asking is why my opponent is doing ABC. Politicians do it all the time. Trump does it. Biden did it. Obama did it. Hillary did it. They all do it. What you just did is the exact same thing. You said, what's the difference if the president of France's wife is a man or not? That's a relative privation. So you're trying to get us to change the subject and not talk about it by purporting that it's not important. Something, if you consider it to not be important, that doesn't mean that the question doesn't still need to be answered. If she's a man, the question should be answered. Whether you think is important or not does not mean that the question is irrelevant. So what you're trying to do here is throw us off the scent. Nice try. But again, you can't use logical fallacies on me, folks. I'm too good at it. All right, you try to pull some bullshit on me, I'm gonna catch you and I'm gonna call you out. So if you comment, all right, one risk that you're running is I'm gonna call you out on your bullshit. You try to pull a logical fallacy on me. They don't work. I'm too good at catching. All right, Phoenix says bias is a hell of a D-rug. Yes, it is. John said you have to ask yourself, is this warranted? No, we don't. But let's talk about several things. Number one, if you run for president of a country and you win, and you present yourself as this is me and this is my wife, and it turns out that your wife is not indeed a woman, but actually a man, does that not mean that you made a sale based on a false premise? I believe it does. What do y'all think? You made a sale based on a false premise. You got the people of France to vote for you based on this is me and this is my wife, the woman. Turns out she's not actually a woman. That means you sold me something that wasn't actually what it was. You lied to me. You lied to the people of France to get elected. Is that not important? Yes, it is important. And number two, even if you don't think it's important, if Candace Owens, who's an investigative journalist, decides that it is important and she wants to talk about it, who are you to tell her that she can't? I mean, she got her own platform, and clearly there's a whole lot of people who care. I just showed you. Candace Owens' YouTube channel, 4.5 million subscribers on 1.4 thousand views. Obviously, there's a bunch of people who do care. So you not caring does not mean that the subject doesn't matter. So that's a non sequitur. John said, what difference does it make if it's true or false other than it's a horrible thing to say? Again, this is an appeal to emotion fallacy. So what you're saying here is a bad thing to say that the woman is a man, but what if the woman is a man? Does that make it a true thing to say? It's not horrible if I'm telling the truth. If I tell a truth that makes you uncomfortable, that doesn't make what I said bad. That makes what I said true. You feeling bad about it does not make me wrong. It makes you immature because you can't deal with the truth. So who's wrong here? Her or you? And again, I'm not even saying that we 100% know. We don't know yet. The only way we're actually going to know, I don't know if we'll ever know. Who knows what they can do surgically these days with science. But them taking this to court made it an issue. Now everybody wants to know. That's the mistake that the Macrons made. Now everybody wants to know. Happy Kitty said, if it's true, why should we care? I just told you. You ran for president under the premise that this is my wife. And if it turns out your wife, who presented as a woman, is actually a man, you lied to me. You got me to vote for you based on a false idea. You told me a lie. Does that matter? Yes, it does. And even if I didn't have that reason, if I just want to know, I want to know. I don't have to justify wanting to know something. If I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, the fact that you don't want the world to ask the same question does not mean I can't ask the question, even if I don't have a justification for asking, even if I just want to know. If you're a public figure and you sold yourself to me based on this presentation and I ask questions about it, it is your responsibility to answer because you work for me. You're the president of a country. You work for the people who voted for you. It's not, oh, I'm only going to answer the questions I want to answer. No, not when you have bosses. I don't know how many people live in France, but however many it is, they're your boss. They voted for you. If the people want to ask Donald Trump a question, Donald Trump is obligated to somehow, some way address that question. Even if he dances around it, he can't just not answer the question. He has to address it. And that's the reason why people keep talking about certain things. Why do people want to talk about the Epstein files? Epstein's dead. Why you want to talk about it? I mean, why is that important? Everybody has an answer for that, right? Okay. Same way people have an answer for the Candace Owens question. If I want to ask it, you got to answer. Why? Because you're a public figure. You got voted in by the people. You are an employee of the people. And if we want to ask you a question, no matter what it is, you are obligated to address the question because you work for us. It's not the other way around. So let's see. Happy Kitty said, don't you have better things to do in your life rather than, what does that even mean? I don't know what you're talking about. Some people would have not voted for him. They knew he was, exactly. If people knew that his wife was not actually a female, would that have changed some votes? Of course it would. Brendan, thanks for the follow. Happy Kitty said, do you vote in France? Me? No, that's what you just used as a Socratic trap. The people of France voted. And by the way, as I said, there was a journalist in France who did this investigation before Candace Owens. Candace Owens noticed that investigation. No one in America knew about it. She brought light to it in America by making a story about it and saying, look what they did to this guy who investigated in France. I'm going to do the investigation from here in America and bring this story to light so that everybody can see it. That's what she did. And now everybody cares because they went and made a bigger story out of it. The Macrones, that is. It's Shug. Good morning. Good to see you. Coconut said, people who hate Candace love Howard Stern. There's a correlation. I will say that. There's a correlation. A couple more comments, folks, then we'll wrap it up. Lanza Zimzum said, you say all politicians lie. Well, you have to lie by design if you're going to be a politician. You can't be a successful politician without lying. If I became a politician, I would have to lie too. You don't have a choice. Diva KBs, thanks for the follow. Brenda said, why would you try to hide it? Well, they were successfully hiding it until they sued Candace Owens. They could have just ignored they probably got annoyed by the thing because Candace Owens' show was getting viewed by millions of people, but it came and it went. It was over. Candace did the series. I listened to all the series. It was over. They could have just let it go. They couldn't let it go. So that was their mistake. Sometimes in life, you got to know when to just let something go. Even if it's annoying, even if you don't like it, even if you think the other person is wrong, sometimes you got to just let it go. And if you don't say anything, the story just kind of goes away. The news cycle that we have today, stories come and go. Within like 3 days, every story is over. Like something's a story today. 3 days from now, nobody's going to be talking about it anymore. No one will ever talk about it again. Everybody just forgets about it and moves on to the next thing. That's what the Macrones should have did, and they should have been smart enough to know that. Let's just not talk about it at all, and people will forget about it, and we'll just keep living happily ever after. They were too dumb to do that. Their emotions got the best of them. Now they made a bigger story out of something that most people didn't even care about. Now everybody's talking about it. That was a mistake. Anna says she's a first lady in quotation marks. Yeah, exactly. Happy said, I don't know what that means. Simply said, if you promise something to the people that voted for you, you're obligated to try and fulfill that. That's right. Shug, thank you for the gift. G, thanks for the follow. Queen Paulette, thanks for the share. And Simply Farm said, you got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away. Yes, exactly. All right, let's wrap this up, folks. We're right at 10:01. I do these lives Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern. Tomorrow we'll be back. Don't know what the topic is going to be, but we'll see. This one I just chose this morning because I saw that Howard Stern got canceled, so I knew this would be a good story. But we will figure out tomorrow what the topic is going to be. I'll see you all at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. You want to work with me directly, go to the link in my profile, Work on Your Game University. Have me as your direct coach. We work on systematizing discipline, performance, and accountability for consistent, predictable results for high-performing individuals and businesses and teams. That's all at Work on Your Game University. Go to the links in my profile and learn more about that. I will see you all tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. We are out of here. Everyone have a great Wednesday. Work on your game.